access. All right, Spell, if you want to share your screen and introduce yourself, that would be great.
Certainly. Okay. All right. Let me jump over to the presentation. I'm not going to go into full screen mode because I may jump out into code every now and then. So hopefully you guys can see everything just fine like this. First of all, I want to thank Kim for inviting me to Lehigh Valley WordPress. I'm very honored to be here. And I hope that I can at least share a little bit of information about the importance of accessibility in your work. Um, yeah, so I guess with that, we'll take it away. This presentation is called Accessibility Gotchas, Common Barriers to Web Access and What You Can Do to Fix. My name is Michael Spellacy. My pronouns are he and him. I'm the Director of Accessibility at Ravency. We just changed our name from TNP Worldwide about a month ago. So we're still getting used to that. TNP Worldwide, now known as Ravency, is a recruitment advertising agency based out of New York City. And that's where I'm from. I have 5 children. That's always a surprise to a lot of people. Oh my God, you have 5 children. Yes, 2 of which have autism. So if you wanted to know what drives me, that's certainly part of the reason. And as you can see behind me, I restore classic arcade cabinets, and friends call me Spell. And hello, new friends. Okay, so probably the most common question that I'm asked is, can we make our website accessible to blind people? Yes, that is a picture of Vince Vaughn on the right. In a stock photography advertisement for a film. I always get a big kick out of it because that's probably what you think of when you think about people in boardrooms asking about accessibility. And it's partially true. Accessibility is a lot more than that. Web accessibility refers to the inclusive practice of making the web usable by people of all abilities and disabilities. That's very, very important to remember. Unfortunately, there's more to it than just making websites accessible for people who are blind. There are, in addition to blindness, there's low vision and color blindness. There are motor disabilities. Inability to use a mouse, slow response time, limited fine motor skills, hearing, deafness and hard of hearing, cognitive disabilities, neurodiversity, learning disabilities, distractibility, inability to remember or focus on large amounts of information. And disabilities affect 20% of the worldwide population, according to the CDC. That's nearly 1 billion people, or to put it in perspective, about the size of China, which is quite large. In the United States, there are 63 million individuals who have a disability as well. In addition to people with disabilities, we also have to be very mindful of people who are aging. Okay, the 17% of the United States is 65 or older, and globally it's 9%. These are not small numbers to dismiss very easily. Yeah, we're all kind of aging now, so we all have to remember to be empathetic about that kind of stuff in our work. Also, there are temporary barriers. We humans are a frail lot, and we're prone to hurting ourselves often. So there are those types of barriers to access as well. In addition to that, we have situational barriers, as I'm sure Some of us have experienced during this past year in the pandemic, we've all had to change our work methods, and some of us are working at home now with children, and so there are lots of distractions uh, in that environment. And there are all kinds of situational disabilities that one has to be mindful of, especially when we take our work and we're using it on things like mobile devices. Even holding a phone outside in direct sunlight could be a form of a situational disability. So these are all important things to keep in mind. Um, what does the law have to say? I don't know if some of you are familiar with Section 508, but it mandates that all electronic and information technology used by federal governments be accessible. Vendors, if you happen to work with the federal government, you also have to be compliant. And the good news about Section 508 is that it used to embrace its own set of guidelines, but it doesn't do that anymore after the 2018 Section 508 refresh. They started embracing something known as WCAG, which I'll get into very, very shortly. WCAG stands for Web Content and Accessibility Guidelines, and they're kind of the guiding principles and guidelines that we adhere to when we're testing against testing for accessibility barriers in our work. All right, so what about private and public sector websites? A lot of the websites you guys build have no requirements under the law to be accessible, but you have a moral obligation to ensure that your sites are meeting some kind of standard. You also need to be mindful of the fact that litigation is on the rise. In the past several years, we've gone from maybe 50 website accessibility cases to thousands, and that number is expected to keep rising in the next several years. What it all comes down to is it being a civil rights issue. Are digital experiences extensions of physical locations? Yes, they are. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay, so WCAG, which I just mentioned a moment ago, right now the current version of WCAG is 2.1. There are 3 levels of conformance, A, AA, and AAA. Throughout all of those levels, there are 78 success criteria that we test against, also called guidelines. Success criteria is the technical term for it. And sometimes you'll see those levels of conformance grouped into principles, such as perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. So for example, you could have a few guidelines from level A, a few from level AA, and 1 or 2 from AAA that might fall under perceivable. These guidelines help us to better wrap our heads around what type of disabilities we need to focus on. Is this something that's perceivable to a user? Can a user operate it? Is it understandable to a user? And is it robust? It's also called POUR for short. Okay, so a lot of people ask, well, what level should I target when I'm doing accessibility? And there are 3 levels. Level A is essential. If you don't meet those, then certain users will find your work impossible to use. Level AA is kind of an extension of that. That's typically what a lot of companies focus on trying to meet as much of in what they produce. Level AA is kind of seen as the gold standard in compliance. You can't claim that you're conformant to something like level AA unless you can show that you're conformant with all of level A. And the same thing goes for AAA. But AAA is really for specialized sites. If you have a website that caters to, people in the people who are blind, then you have to meet, all of that level of conformance. So that's pretty much the breakdown there. Okay, and when it comes to testing, which is what I do a lot of testing. Um, it's broken down into automated testing, which we use third-party apps and services that can scan website for barriers. Uh, Automated testing is cool. It's nice. It's convenient. It makes the job a lot easier. However, automated testing only can find 40 to 50% of all known accessibility barriers. So the rest of it has to be done manually. Um, and that's testing with things like screen readers, other various assistive technologies, keyboard only testing, manual inspection by well-versed professionals, and disabled professionals if you are lucky enough to have them in your organization. True inclusive design is giving people with disabilities a seat at the table. So if you're fortunate enough to have somebody who's disabled helping you out with your testing, then they're going to be able to shine a light on a lot of things that you wouldn't be able to find yourself because you're not disabled. So I always enjoy situations where I can work side by side with somebody with a disability because, man, they're really going to be able to improve the quality of the experiences that you're trying to put out there. Very good stuff. All right, so I didn't want to overwhelm anybody tonight because I know accessibility might be a little bit of a scary subject for some. So what I wanted to focus on primarily were some of the common issues that I see when I'm doing accessibility testing. And hopefully we can, shine a light on them a little bit more clearly so you guys can understand them a little bit better and take that knowledge with you in your own work. So some of the most common gotchas that I happen to see are missing accessible text. That doesn't just mean alternative text, but proper labeling. Missing captions on videos, missing keyboard access, focus suppression, and poor contrast. Okay, so missing accessible text. All right, so non-text content, that's guideline 1.1.1. This is done through automated and manual testing. And what you need to do when you are looking at images in particular here is you need to ensure that important images have equivalent alternative text. Decorative images require an alt attribute, but the value can be left empty, which is also called a null alt. CSS backgrounds require no alternative text, but if the image is important, you should be asking yourself, well, should this be used as a CSS background? Maybe I should inline the image and apply alternative text to it. This one hangs up a lot of people. Linked images. I see this often where I run into an image with a link, a hyperlink around it, and there's no alt text on it. And because there's no alt text on it, the user doesn't understand the purpose of the link. And also complex images like infographics and graphs and things of that nature require that descriptions be provided in context or on a separately linked page. Okay, so when are images important? That's probably one of the most common questions I get. The answer is not always easy, but this is the most simple way that I can provide an answer to you, and it's when they are contextually or emotionally important to your content, which means, for example, let's say you have content about Leonardo da Vinci, and you're showing some of his paintings like the Mona Lisa. All right, that's something where you would probably want to provide, alternative text to describe that image because it's not decorative. It has purpose, it's contextually important to the surrounding content. So that would be an excellent use case to provide alternative text. If something conveys some kind of emotion, that's also another opportunity to provide alternative text. Writing good alternative text. Be concise but descriptive. Keep it short but descriptive. Okay, you don't have to write an essay. You just need to describe the image. And the way I like to explain that to folks is, imagine you're describing it to somebody over the phone or somebody who can't see. How would you describe that image? Okay, and once you kind of get a good grasp on that, and get some practice in, then describing images becomes pretty painless. You need to avoid terms like picture of or image of, because people who are using assistive technology already know that they're dealing with images and don't need to be told that they're engaging with an image. So you can drop that. You should avoid using keywords in your alternative text. You must always remember that websites are for people, not search engines. And I know we have an SEO person here, so no offense there. But yeah, you just have to remember, at the heart of what we produce and put out there, people are at the end of this. They're the ones who are using it, people who are disabled, and they need to understand that content more. Images with embedded text in them should contain verbatim alternative text. It's pretty simple.
Hey, Spell, just one more. What if you have like stock images and you have people around a conference table talking? Like, I've seen people say, man at a conference table talking to a group of women or something.
Well, those are tough ones, because those could be considered more like branding type things, or, maybe decorative, but it really depends on the context of your content. If it's important, if you feel that it's important, I think it's always best to err on the side of caution and maybe provide alternative text, because it doesn't hurt to provide a little description on those sorts of images. So why not add something there? You probably don't want to get carried away, because there's also something known as noise that you can introduce to assistive technology users. And so you want to be careful not to drown out the experience with too much information. You just want to get right to the point and label your stuff appropriately and where you feel it's necessary to do so.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so, all right, so non-text content covers more than just images. There are things like form buttons. You have to make sure that they have a descriptive value. Let's say you have, like I work on job sites all day, and visually, it's when you have a search form with a button in it that says search, it might be better to be a little bit more explicit in that case. Or worse, let's say you have a button that has an hourglass on it, or not an hourglass, a magnifying glass. You want to make sure that you're providing some means of conveying that button, that button's purpose. So you can put text in the button and hide it off screen. There are lots of different techniques to do that, or you can do something called ARIA. So ARIA-label equals search. Or if you're just putting in the text for everybody to use, then you should be more explicit and use more explicit terms like search jobs, like be direct and explicit in those particular cases so people understand the purpose of the interactive component that they're engaging with. Form inputs have associated text labels, not placeholders, which we'll look at in 1 second. Multimedia is identified via accessible text. HTML video or audio should be identified and have an accessible name associated with it. Iframes, we stick YouTube videos on our sites all day. YouTube's default iframe code never has that title on it, but sure enough, we need it there, and it's our responsibility to get that stuff in there so that people understand the content of the iframe that they're engaging with. So at this point here, I'm just going to open up a little bit of code to just give you examples of those. All right, so labels, all right. You probably see this a lot where you have a form element with a placeholder text in it, okay? That's bad. That's placeholder text and it's not a label, okay? This here is a label, all right? You want to associate your label with the form element down there. Placeholder text is meant for, is meant to provide, you know, kind of like a hint, you know, or something of that nature as to maybe the formatting of the content that you would like the user to enter into the input field. So here you see the example with the label, which is associated with the input, and we're using placeholder text to provide a hint to the end user that this is the type of, you know, formatting we're looking for before you hit submit.
And you,
of course, you'll do validation for that, but still, it's a helpful aid.
can
Yes.
you hide your label where it's just accessible for readers to see it, or that's not, is that frowned on?
It's not, well, there are some cases where you can do it. I mean, if you're dealing with a single input field, you know, you might be able to use ARIA in that case to pass along a proper label. But, you know, or like a simple search form, you might be able to get away with it. There are lots of interesting techniques out there. One that I happen to like, but it's not a bulletproof technique, is something called a floating label. And that's where you take the label and you kind of put it over the input field. And when you apply focus to the input, the label will kind of, whoop, it'll just fly up. And that's kind of a way around that problem. But it does come with some other UX issues that you need to be mindful of. You can excessively hide the label. And again, for smaller forms, it might be okay. But if you're dealing with more complex forms and stuff like that, I strongly advise not to, you know, do something like that, because it's just going to make the form not only difficult for people who are disabled to use, but people, you know, just everyday able people are, you know, may have problems with it too. Especially if you're like autofilling in content, and you know, when you do that, you know, the hinted content could disappear, you know, so it gets a little tricky there, so you have to be careful.
That makes sense. Thank you.
When you're dealing with iframes, you know, here's a, oh my God. Okay, I thought I forgot to put a title there, but I didn't. All right, so when you're dealing with iframes, you stick a title attribute in. You could use ARIA label too, but a title seems to be well supported, more well supported by assistive technology. And that's it. You've done your job. Usually, again, the title should describe the contents of the iframe. Pretty simple. Here we're dealing, okay, there's your iframe. Here we're dealing with an HTML5 video, okay? Again, this is a case where you would probably use ARIA label to describe, you know, the video at hand, okay? It's an interactive component, so it should have some kind of label. Let's see what those, okay, so going back to Prezzo here. All right, so with video, we all love video. All right, but videos need captions, all right? You would need to ensure that synchronized captions are provided for non-live video, okay? Captions, ensure, oh yeah, what you also need to do is ensure accuracy in your captions. You know, you actually have to read, you know, what you're going to pass over to your users. YouTube can auto-produce captions for you, which we call auto-craptions. They're not always accurate. So you need to verify this stuff and vet this stuff very, very carefully before you stick it on a end user, especially someone who is disabled and deaf. So that's important. So make sure you do that. If you're self-hosting your video, and using HTML5, or even if you are hosting on YouTube, there's this great little service out there called rev.com. And they'll produce the captions for you. Just send them a link to the video. It's cheap. If you're dealing with videos that are relatively small, like 2 to 3 minutes long, I deal with a lot of talking head videos all day. So it's relatively cheap. It's like, $2 a minute. So there's no excuse to not, get these things done. And, you can always bill it back to the client, and that's fine. Yeah, getting captions is pretty easy, and then implementing them is not that hard either. What you should also really consider are transcripts too, because there are situations where captions may not cut it. You could have a situation with someone who's deaf and blind, and they may be using assistive technology known as a Braille reader to access it. And they're not going to be able to access the captions that are in your video. So what they might rely on are things like, transcripts. Jumping back to the examples here, I have a little video of the first trailer for The Empire Strikes Back. Star Wars is near and dear to my heart. We have our label here in the HTML5 source. We're pointing to the MP4. We have a track element here with kind equals captions. We have the VTT file here, okay? And we have the source language. And it's very, very simple to produce these. I'll just play this for a second. So there's there are the captions. If you want to see what they look like, then it's just a simple text file, and it's all synced up to show this particular text at these given points in time. Very simple. You could even produce them yourself if you really wanted to. There's nothing stopping you. You can even redesign the caption fields if you are so inclined, but just make sure that they're contrast friendly as well. And here we have a simple transcript of the video too, which you can simply provide in some kind of toggling mechanism. That's usually the best way to go about doing it. So that's it. That's gotcha number 2. That's captions.
There's a question about how do you produce, how are transcripts produced, and can you link to a PDF?
Can you, well, you can also go through rev.com for the transcripts if you like. They produce those as well. The thing with PDFs, you have to be careful because you have to ensure that those PDFs are accessible.
They have to be accessible too.
Yeah, so you could, while you may mean well by doing that, you could inadvertently wind up causing a barrier there. So I find it's usually best when you're dealing with transcripts to let the HTML do it, because it's, it doesn't rely on any kind of plugins or third-party tools. It's just there. It's native to the browser, and it can be read very, very easily. So try to do it in HTML if you can.
Thank you.
All right, so keyboard testing. This one's going to be fun. All right, so when you're keyboard testing, you have to ensure that all page functionality is available using the keyboard. It's pretty simple. Essentially, anything you can do with a mouse, you better be damn sure you could do with a keyboard. Unless the functionality can't be accomplished in any known way using the keyboard, like you're doing some kind of freehand drawer or something. Using correct elements for the job can help here, okay? Instead of using a div or a hyperlink, use a button. Golden rule about links versus buttons is buttons do things, links take us places. I've run into lots of situations where I'm tabbing through an interface and I'll land on a link, okay? And I click on the link and it shows me maybe, it has a drop down below it. And that's fine, it works. But it's not always the right thing to use. And we'll take a quick look at that now. Okay, so, no, all right, so keyboard. All right, so in my code here, as an example, I have 4 different buttons, okay? One is marked up as a div. One is marked up as a link without an href. One is marked up, you probably see this one a lot in your travels. You know, a link with an href with a hash sign in it. It's not meant to do anything. And here you have a button. So I'm going to tab through this interface, and I want you to watch where the focus lands. Let's move this up a little bit. Okay, so in this particular case, you're going to see the focus land on the third one. Why is that? And it's very simple. The first two, the first one is a div. It doesn't accept keyboard focus. Okay. In order to get the keyboard focus to accept focus, you would need to do something like this. I lost my, okay. You would need to add something called a tab index. Okay. And once you get the tab index in there, okay, you got focus now. Okay. That's a good thing, but it's not a good thing. And let me tell you why. Okay. While it may behave like a button that you can bring focus to via your tab key, people who are disabled have certain expectations when they're engaging with certain elements on the page. In this particular case, we're using a div styled up to look like a button. It takes focus like a button, but it's not a button because it's not announcing itself as a button to someone who can't see. And also, when you're dealing with elements like these, there are extra keyboard behavior. There are additional keys that one who is disabled can access to engage with that particular element. So in the case of an interactive component, like a button, they expect 2 things. They expect the enter key to work, and they expect the space bar to work, okay? They use those interchangeably, okay? So while we may be able to, oh, by the way, I forgot to mention the fact that all of these have a very simple function associated with it that bring up an alert, okay? So when I land on this now and I click on enter, nothing happens, okay? In order for me to make this behave like a button, I would need to write additional JavaScript for the enter key and the spacebar key press event to get that to work for both of those situations, okay? So you're adding a lot of complexity into the situation that you don't need to do if you had just used a button to begin with, because by using the correct HTML element, it comes with a lot of built-in accessibility that you don't need to worry about, which is very, very cool, okay? So for example here, when I tab onto this, nothing happens. When I tab to this, it skips over this A because there's no href there, and any element that doesn't have an href is not a focusable element. So in this situation, when I land on the link and I click my enter key, okay, the alert comes up, but when I click on my, when I click on my space bar, nothing happens, okay? In order to get that to work, I'm gonna have to write all this extra code, you know, and to get it to work, and you're injecting a lot of unnecessary complexity into your code too. But by using a button, okay, so when I land on this button now, the only thing that I need to worry about doing, okay, so that works when I click on my enter key, and it works when I click on my spacebar key, all right? And all I had to do was write one click event for it, okay? And also, what I'm talking about here, the built-in stuff, okay? Buttons have these things called roles, okay? They're announced as buttons to assistive technology, okay? So that's cool. And they also have inherent tab index. So in order to get something like a div to work, with all of this and behave just like a button would, I would have to add tab index. I would have to add role equals button. Okay, that's a little bit of ARIA there. Whoops. Oh dear. Okay, pardon me. Role equals button. Okay, so now when I land on this, it'll take focus, it'll announce itself as a button. And in addition to that, I would have to write, I would have to create, let me just uncomment this, hopefully it'll work. So you have to write an extra event in there for your key press. So all this extra work that you have to do if you just use a button, then you wouldn't have to deal with all that. And this is prone to error too. When you have to, you know, announce roles and add tab index there, you could potentially screw it up. So, you know, why do that? So use the right element for the job, and always remember the golden rule: buttons do things and links take us places. Okay, and as long as you remember that, then you won't have a lot of issues with keyboard access. Okay. And this is high level. I would love to go into this even more in the future with you guys, and show you things like ARIA and how to you know, dress it up with states that announce themselves. For example, and I'll just give you a very high level preview of that. These buttons here can contain elements called ARIA. Okay. And you can do, you know, ARIA expanded, I spell it right, equals false. Okay, so when I'm using a screen reader and I land on that button, it's going to announce press me button expanded false. Okay, and that's pretty cool because you're able to actually pass states over to assistive technology so that they understand that the button is either, you know, toggling something open or closing something. And you would use JavaScript to, you know, toggle that value between true and false, and it would announce to the screen reader. Really cool stuff. But that's certainly for another lesson.
You could hear the passion in your voice, Spell.
Oh yes.
You did. When you started easing into this, it was just like, okay, he's on a roll now. This is his area.
Yeah, it just, I just think, I don't know, you know, I just think it's so cool to really get under the hood and like tweak this stuff and just make stuff that anybody could potentially use, you know, and that's really the promise of the web, and that promise is for everybody, that we're all, you know, able to use this thing, you know, so it's definitely groovy stuff. Okay, so moving on. All right, so that's high level keyboard access, all right? All right, focus states, oh my gosh, okay, so all interactive elements must have a visible outline, okay? A lot of folks like to suppress these and hide them because clients don't think they look good. But they're really important, okay? They aid low vision, limited mobility, and power users, all right? All you keyboard jockeys out there who don't like to use a mouse could benefit from that too. All browsers have their own default outline styling. Some of them suck, and that's why clients ask us to suppress them, but we shouldn't. Outlines must never be removed unless replaced with an adequate alternative, all right? New outline or focus states must have a contrast ratio of 3:1. And be careful that new custom outline does not match the background color. So jumping back over to our examples here, you'll notice here that we have a default outline that's set by the browser on all of these interactive elements. Now, clients say, hey, we don't like the way that looks. Can you get rid of it? Your answer should be, nah. Don't get rid of it. You should really consider keeping it. But you know, I live in the real world and I deal with clients all day who don't like this kind of stuff. So yeah, you have to be able to compromise a little bit and throw out alternatives. Now, outlines can be redesigned, but outright removing them is really not cool because you could be, you know, creating a bad situation for somebody. So what you can do essentially is, what I like to do is you can, you know, actually, hold on here. So you can redesign these however you want. You just have to make sure the contrast of the focus outline doesn't stink, so that people can actually still see it. So, you know, 1 pixel, I don't know, actually, pixels, I don't know, not that, green, solid. All right, so you can redesign these if you like. So, you know, now our outlines will be green. What I mentioned on that last point was, if you're redesigning them, you need to be careful. The one nice thing about the default outlines is that they can, when you're focusing on an element that has a background that's the same color, you know, as the outline, it doesn't get lost. So for example, I'm not going to suppress the outline here. I'm going to put it back to its natural state. And when I go into something like this here, a button with a black background, boom, it's going to turn white automatically. The browser does that, and it's not lost within the, it doesn't bleed into the background. So if you're redesigning this kind of stuff, you need to be careful. You might be able to do some trickery with outline, but what I tend to do is I like to use the box shadow. And box shadow, it allows me to use 2 colors, so that way when I'm tabbing through this, and right now we're seeing the box shadow version of the outline, that effect when it comes to different background colors isn't lost. You know, I'm still getting that there, so that's something to keep in mind. Okay, so outlines are good, don't suppress them, otherwise I'm going to have to come and reach to the internet and yeah. So don't do it.
Right. I have had graphic artists say, "Oh, I don't like those. I don't like that. I don't like that. I just want to go."
Yeah.
And I'm like, no.
It's usually the creative lot that you know, will make those types of things, but you need to educate them and just say this is important, and you know, just always be willing to come to a middle ground there with them. So it's not all bad. All right, so let's see. Oh boy, this took longer than I expected. Okay, so the other thing is contrast minimum. All right, when you're dealing with text, you got to make sure the contrast is good. It has to be discernible. You know, people. You know, you don't want to lose any of your users because your content was too hard to read. And you also need to be mindful of the fact that your content is going to be, you know, used under various different conditions, like we discussed with situational barriers that people can face. You know, it's important to ensure that contrast is right there. So for text and images, text and images of text have a contrast ratio of at least 4.5 to 1, and large text at least 18 points, or 24 pixels in web terms, or 14 points, and that's 18.66 pixels in web terms. And bold has a contrast ratio of at least 3.1. I know that might sound confusing, but I'll clear that up in 1 second. Incidental text, like let's say you have a disabled button on a form, and logo types, those are exempt from color contrast ratios. You don't need to worry about it there. So jumping over here, just to explain this a little bit better, let me open up this in full screen. All right, so I have a little bit of text down here. Can you all see it? Hopefully you can. So let me open up my inspector. All right. Okay, so the text on here is, oh, hold on. All right, groovy. Okay, so the text color on here is like really super light. Okay, and you know, you would have to ensure that that meets a 4.5 to 1 color contrast ratio. Okay, that's the luminance between the background color and the foreground text, all right? So, you know, obviously you would need to change that to something darker to pass that particular guideline. If this font size was increased to 18 pixels, okay, whoops, 18 pixels.
I was gonna say that's a new one.
What's a new one?
Well, font 18 pixels. That would be.
Yes.
That would have been a new one.
Oh shoot, it's text size. I'm drawing. Why am I drawing? Yeah, it's font size. Okay. You're making me doubt myself.
Should not comment about mistakes. I will be quiet.
All right. So if I were to put this to 22 pixels, okay, and hold on here. Okay. It would still fail. So we would need to ensure that this is 4.5.1. I am drawing a blank here. I'm very sorry. All right, for some reason, there's no contrast information available. It should be working, but it's not. Hold on, bear with me 1 second.
So that's in the code inspector?
Oh yeah.
Use that feature.
You can check it in the code inspector, but for some reason, it doesn't appear to be working right now. See, this is what you get for doing live coding.
But it's nice to see samples, so.
Yeah, it never fails. Well, this is really weird. It should be showing me contrast information here, so I'm really sorry about that. I'm going to have to get back to you on that. But just keep in mind that, you know, this should be darker in order to pass. Actually, hold on here. We'll do something really light. So weird. Like it was working this afternoon when I tested it. Okay. All right. Well, okay. Okay. So your first inclination might be, well, do I have to change the color? And yes, you should change the color. You might want to see if you can change the font size, and that may work under certain conditions if the font is if the font color is 3.1 or over. But if it's not, then no matter how big you make the text, it's always going to fail that particular guideline. So if I made this 100 pixels in size, it would always fail. So unless it's meeting a 3:1 contrast ratio.
On a side note, in WordPress with the Gutenberg editor, and if you're choosing fonts with the font pick, colors with the picker, it will tell you if you have a contrast.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. I love tools that can do that. You know, that's fantastic. Okay, so let me move on here. Sorry about that. Okay, so I just wanted to mention some other issues that come up. These are honorable mentions. I see them fairly regularly, but not as much as those other things that we just talked about. One is info and relationships. So simply put, semantic markup, logical headings. Make sure you're testing your work. Throw it through a validator. You know, if there are any heavy-duty errors in there, then fix them. You should be able to resize your sites up to 200%. So, for example, let me go to my corporate website here. You know, so you know, I could see the site up to 200%. It should still, everything should be discernible and functional. So you want to make sure that your site can do that as well. All right, pause, stop, hide. This is a popular one. If you have any kind of auto-playing things on your page, like a video or a carousel that auto-plays, you got to add a pause button. People need that because they could have vestibular disorders or, you know, a bad migraine, you know, so, you know, you got to give them a way to be able to stop that stuff. Or it could be issues, cognitive issues where, or, you know, they might take a long time for them to read something. So you want to be able to give them some kind of mechanism to stop this stuff. And you certainly don't want to cause any kind of issues either. 3 flashes or below. Sorry, typo. You want to avoid content flashing on your screen more than 3 times per second. Okay, you could kill somebody essentially by giving them a seizure. So be mindful of that. I have a good story about that I'll tell you later. Bypass blocks. You've all heard of skip links before. You know, those are important when you're dealing with large amounts of links, very large navigation. You want to be able to give users a way to skip over that stuff if you can, and skip links are a pretty good way to do that. Make sure your pages are titled. That's a pretty simple one. And parsing, again, validate your work. You know, send it through the W3C validator, and you know, fix all major issues where you can. Oh, just back up to info and relationships there, headings, okay? This comes up a lot. It's very important for SEO, and it's important for accessibility as well. Make sure that you are, you know, have a logical heading structure. Maybe you know, one H1 on the page, and everything is logically ordered and structured, so that somebody using assistive technology can understand what they're reading. You know. And these are some of the tools that I use in my testing. One great little thing that I use for to help me discern when I need some kind of alt text on an image is the alt decision tree, which is pretty cool. Essentially, it'll ask you these questions. You know, does the image contain text? No. Continue. Yes. And then, you know, it'll branch you down to your, hopefully your final answer there as to whether you need alternative text or not. So it's kind of a useful little thing sometimes when I don't know the answer. Axe Dev Tools is fantastic. We use it all the time. It's a browser plugin. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with it. But it's a DevTools plugin, and it's extraordinarily useful. You can test your pages out, and it'll list all of the issues that you might have wrong with your page. You should be going after critical and serious issues where you can. Some of it may be a mystery to you when you're reading it, and that's okay. They provide a lot of documentation on the issue. And you know, hey, you have an accessibility person hanging out in your Slack forum, so you can always ask me if you're not sure about something. So that's definitely a useful tool. Let's see what else we got here. We have the web developer toolbar, which is also very, very convenient. For example, let's go to let me go to this site, Spectrum. Okay, so this is a site my company just did recently. So the web developer toolbar is a neat little plugin. All right, it's got all these useful utilities in there that you can use to help you check out your site. One of my favorite ones to check is to check the document outline. I like to check my heading structure with this to, you know, instantly see, you know, my logical structure, heading structure on the page. If there's something missing, it'll tell you, and that's always cool. Hey, look, I'm missing something. Got to fix that. So that's definitely useful. Let's see what else. Wave. Wave and the W3C validator are built into the web developer toolbar, so you don't have to keep going to those sites all the time. When you use the web developer toolbar, you just go over to tools, and you can you know, click on validate accessibility, and it'll it'll parse your page and it'll send it over to something called Wave, which is another evaluation tool for accessibility, which is pretty. Let me send it over now. So I can validate the accessibility of the page. Again, this is automated stuff, so you're only talking about 40–50% of accessibility issues, but that's better than, you know, 0. This might take a little long to load, but you get, oh, okay, there's an error there. I don't know why that's happening. Damn it. Let's see, what else we got?
Coming.
What? Yeah, they must have known. W3C validator, I'm sure you guys are all familiar with that. You know, manual testing, okay? When you're testing for keyboard access, simply walk through the interface with your tab key, all right? Tab, 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 click, you know, see if you can use it without a mouse. And if you can't, try to address those particular issues if you can. Listen to your work. I cannot express to you how important it is to download a screen reader. And there is NVDA is a wonderful screen reader. It's free. If you're on the Mac, there's VoiceOver. You know, and just listen to your work. You know, when you're listening to your work, you know, it can make all the difference. You may hear things there, and you'll get a better appreciation for how interfaces are built, and you'll understand how people with disabilities are going to be engaging with that work. So I can't recommend it enough. So make sure you're doing that where you can. There's this great little tool called the Color Contrast Analyzer, which is really swell. Oh yeah, this question comes up a lot. How do you vet design issues before they get built? Okay, now you're in Gutenberg and stuff can get flagged for you, and you can run dev tools and when it works, you know, you can see what the contrast issues are, but you also need to be looking at the designs early on, because that's going to, you know, afford you an opportunity to catch contrast issues sooner rather than later. And so the color, they're from the UK there. So color contrast analyzer gives you a little picker here. You can zoom in. So imagine this is this presentation is like you know, a comp PDF or, you know, a Photoshop file, and you can, well, with the Photoshop file you can get the hex values from. But say you're looking at a JPEG or a PDF, you know, you can just take the colors right there, and you know, you can compare your foreground color with your background colors, and it'll tell you right here if you're going to fail WCAG or not. Okay. Yeah, you're oh, hold on. Any kind of tools that you have in your browser DevTool environment are also good. So make sure you're using DevTools when it is working. The again,
Right.
you can check for contrast issues. Oh, the browser DevTools have. Now I don't know. Firefox and Chrome both have them, but. Or variants of them, but when you go into, come on, all right, hold on. So when you're, actually, let me go here instead. This will be better. So when you're testing for stuff, not a lot of people realize this, but if you go over here in your DevTools, there's this little tab called accessibility. And what it'll do is it'll provide a lot of useful information about the element that you're dealing with. So in this particular case where I'm using a button, you know, it'll tell me if it has a proper label on it. You know, there's the text for the button. You know, it'll tell me what kind of role it is, which is also important because that's what assistive technology and then people who are blind are going to hear when they're engaging with this stuff. So it's very, very useful. It'll tell you if it's a focusable element or not. A div, it'll probably say false there. But buttons and links, it'll say true. This is all useful information that you need to understand in order to you know, build your interfaces properly. So play around with it when you can. It's very, very useful. And lately, there's been a lot of drama in the accessibility field over these things called accessibility overlays, okay? These are little widgets that you stick on your site that magically make your sites accessible. But I'm here to tell you that those things don't work. They're sold by snake oil salesmen, and you should really stay away from those types of solutions because they don't solve inherent accessibility issues that may be in your work. They're more of a Band-Aid. You might be able to use them in certain situations if you're dealing with any kind of remediation while fixing your site to get it up to conformance, but as a permanent solution, don't use it. I launched this little site about a week ago and it went viral. So it's a lot of people like having a simple answer to, especially where I work, they enjoyed having a simple answer to why you shouldn't use these types of things on your sites. And they also hurt people in the disability community and the accessibility community, because at the end of the day, our job is to build accessible interfaces and help disabled people use our interfaces by crafting them properly. And so, putting these Band-Aids on your sites are really go against that. And believe me, I would love for there to be a solution to this kind of stuff that, fixes your site with one line of code, but we ain't there yet, kids. So
we have a question. Is accessibility considered an accessibility overlay?
Yes.
It is, okay.
Yeah. And there, we in the accessibility community have a lot of problems with them. They lie about, they claim full conformance, and that's just a lie. And I'll tell you right off the bat that it's a lie, because they say full conformance, but what they're doing is they're taking advantage of the fact that a lot of people don't understand accessibility, and a lot of people are fearful of getting sued. So they're taking advantage of that situation too. And these tools that you put on your site can't fix inherent accessibility issues. For example, captions on a video. That's important. Can an overlay fix that? No, it can't. So therefore, it's like a total fraud. So you got to stay away from tools like that. And with that, I'm just going to leave you with a quote by Sir Tim Berners-Lee. The power of the web is in its universality. Access by everyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect of that. So keep that in mind in your travels. And that's what makes the internet so wonderful, is that, if we build it right, we all can benefit from it, so that's my spiel.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And there's you have your own website.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Yeah. I'm sorry, it's not WordPress.
He's on Twitter and he follows a lot of other accessible people and conversations. So I follow Spell, and mostly he retweets or comments on other people's things that I would have never seen before. So
yeah. Oh yeah, I'm big. I'm big. I like engaging with that community. Right. If you're interested in accessibility and you really want to learn more about it, then it's really good to get engaged with that community. I've learned so much from these people. I merely stand on the shoulders of giants. These people are really true pioneers in this field, and they've taught me so much over the past several years. So it's really been wonderful.
Excellent. Well, we have a few more minutes. I don't want to run the video too long, but if anybody has any questions that didn't ask in the chat, feel free to chime in.
Oh, was there? Oh yeah, I forgot there was a chat here.
That's okay. I was asking questions that popped up in the chat. So it worked out well. It was like, that's why I was asking so many questions. It wasn't for me.
Yeah, right. Not for you, Kim, not for you.
All right. Did you have a question, Kirsch?
No, I thought it was great. I'm working on a museum site right this minute, and all of that information is really useful in terms of what I'm doing and in terms of what I can beat them over the head for what they're not doing.
Oh, that's very interesting. So like when you say a museum site, will it have a lot? I'm sure it'll have a lot of multimedia on it and images and the pictures. Yes.
Right now, no multimedia, just pictures.
Okay.
And stuff that should be better described. And a lot
Yeah.
of that's on me. And so
Okay.
I need to do a better job of that. And I appreciate the information because, here's a picture of a thing is not good enough when there's 3 pictures in the thing. And
Mhm.
there you go.
Yep, yeah.
So we have a question in there about, can you see that spell? It says, what does Google search Webmaster Console say about accessibility? Do they have any?
Well, you know what? I mean, accessibility in like in the eyes of Google is certainly very important. It goes a lot of the time. It goes hand in hand with SEO, and I think if you use tools like Lighthouse, you're probably familiar with that. Perhaps that's a built-in. As a matter of fact, it's right here. When you're in the browser and you go to, yeah, it's right there. So you can test for it. And accessibility is one of the things that that you can test for. Actually, the accessibility test that they run is based off of this tool, the rules and rules that are Axe. The people who produce Axe work with Google, and Google leverages their rule set here.
Hold up a second. I have a question. Axe, AX, or Axe, like they say in Baltimore, ACKS.
It's AXE. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I have links at the end of the presentation with
Great,
all
thanks.
with access to all those tools.
Yeah,
so
we'll load them.
you can walk.
I know that Google sends us periodically things like if our fonts are too small, or it will notice this page has things like that. So I know they're.
Yeah, they are definitely up on it. They want you to produce a good experience, so they're going to call you out for that kind of stuff. A good experience begets a good search engine ranking.
Right,
So
right.
it behooves you to make sure that you're producing as solid an experience as you possibly can, so that the SEO gods shine down upon you.
For accessibility, now there's so many aspects, because once again, I think years ago when we first came into it, we were thinking, oh, this is people who can't see, but realizing no, it's temporary disabilities, it's people motion.
Yeah.
Is there
People
a browser
sitting on the beach?
Sitting on a beach? Yeah. Are there browsers that the disabled community leans more towards using that we want to make? Because one thing as developers, we have to rule out, like, I'm not going to support this anymore, or we're focusing on Google now. We used to focus on Microsoft and now Chrome.
Yeah, that's a good question. I really don't think it matters. I think probably they have a preference toward, there's more of an inclination towards Firefox. But you know what? At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Your site should be accessible no matter what browser they happen to be viewing it on. So it's
all your tools are in Chrome.
Well, yeah, but they have comparable. Yeah, I use Chrome, but a lot of the tools that I shared here, they have plugins for Chrome, so you can for Firefox.
Firefox, okay.
Yeah, and even Edge too. So if Edge is your thing, well, I don't know why it would be, but you can, there are tools for that too.
Somebody had mentioned the National Park Service social media does some good alt text. I guess that would be something to look at. Public sites that are required by law, be AAA or to be AA, to have those certain requirements, and see what they're doing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, sure. I mean, get under the hood and take a look. I mean, that's how I've been learning for the past 25 years. See what other people do. That's but yeah, I think there are more the federal sites and
federal. That was the word I was looking for.
Yeah, those types of sites.
Government,
government sites. Yeah, federal sites, local, state sites too. Definitely take a look at those, and there's a lot to learn out there. So
earlier this year, I was approached. I built a site for a restaurant and passed it off to another agency. And the restaurant owner came to her and was concerned because there's been a lot of litigation, especially towards restaurants being accessible.
Yeah.
And he wanted to know, I don't want to get sued. Mm-hmm. So we did a low cost accessibility audit
Yeah.
fix the obvious things that, I mean, the site's 4 years old, so there were things. But when I mentioned, well, you know, this is still the other stuff we have to fix, and this is how long it's going to take, he didn't do it. And I'm thinking he's going to lose way more money getting sued.
It's very possible. It's very possible. You know, unfortunately, there are these things called drive-by litigations, you know, where people are just looking for a quick payout. You know, unfortunately, there are a lot of those taking advantage of the situations. Those are the cases you really have to be worried about. But they're usually I mean, you know what, if your site doesn't have a tremendous amount of barriers, and you're quick to address those types of issues when they come up, more than likely you're not going to have any type of issues. Okay, you know, it's the big companies that, you know, these people really go after. It's the people who don't do anything that usually get into hot water. So if you're proactive and you're willing to take on those challenges when they come your way, I don't think there's anything you will need to worry about. You know, of course, it could be painful at times if you haven't considered accessibility throughout the entirety of your process. Then unfortunately, that could be an expensive endeavor. So that's why I'm always preaching within my company. I'm always, you know, asking people to, you know, get ahead of it, be proactive, you know, talk about accessibility, you know, understand what the client's needs are when it comes to accessibility. And even if they don't know, you know it's the right thing to do. So you should try to provision for that as much as you possibly can. You know, just, you know, don't, just do it. You know, you don't need permission to be more inclusive in your work. So definitely do it where and when you can, you know, and you probably won't have any kind of issues.
All right. Well, I'm going to stop the recording. We're going to go on, but I just want to stop the recording for now. So I wanted on record to say thank you so much. You have opened the doors for having you 10 more times.
Okay.
For sure.